Hello, after a long hiatus. Welcome back to Bright Onion Music Discussion.
Oh, so I was drinking water there.
This is our intro. This is our 2-year-long wait for
oops.
the intro, and you ruined it by drinking water.
Oh, well, I was thirsty. So, let's move on. Today we're going to be talking about Slowdive, the band, and we're going to be talking about their 4 albums. They have EPs, they have some soundtracks that they've done, some side stuff, and some bonus tracks to most of their albums. We're not going to be talking on all of those. We're mostly just going to be talking about the albums.
First off, describe the band as a general description of like what they are, what genre and stuff.
Oh, okay. Well, shoegaze is a genre. And
what is shoegaze?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What is shoegaze? Well, shoegaze
it's a weird
is
name,
characterized by the idea of always staring down at their guitar pedals. Because there are tons of guitar pedals, and a lot of the guitar pedals are put to the extreme, like reverb guitar pedals or delays or all that sort of thing are a lot of the time put to the extreme. Some other bands that are shoegaze, for example, are My Bloody Valentine, which we may cover in the future. And
as a maybe album spotlight at least.
Yes, well, they have 2 albums that
would be a short video.
It would be a short video, but yeah. And My Bloody Valentine is more like heavy metal, but ambient, or more just distorted. But Slowdive, on the other hand, is actually very clean and very ambient in the way that they're more just really relaxing rock. So that's probably the best way to describe Slowdive is relaxing ambient rock with lots of guitar effects.
Or like dream pop, even, is the description for their music, which is a kind of cool genre label.
It is.
But yeah, so some more background, I guess, is, so shoegaze, as you said, was kind of almost like a fan-given genre label, kind of like the same way IDM was a fan-made thing, intelligent dance music. Like no one would actually market their music as IDM.
It's like super pretentious.
Yeah, really pretentious. And shoegaze is like a really weird term. Like where would that kind of like what does that have to do with shoes?
Well, staring down at their shoes.
Staring down at their staring. People joke, right? Like these kind of like bands in the '90s or like early '90s, late '80s, around when the scene began. Which I don't know much of the history, but I don't think it was a very well-known scene either.
Oh, no.
But it'd be, these bands that have, like, heavy reverb, heavy distortion, but, like, as a blanket, not as, like, a sharp metal-type distortion.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd always be looking at their feet because of all the pedals they have. So, kind of cool. But, around this time, the early 90s, when they first started their career, they were heavily overshadowed by My Bloody Valentine, as you said. Because like while the genre was around before My Bloody Valentine, they basically took it in the most extreme direction, where they made the most crazy, like sedated sounding, green music, and so that kind of stole the show. Really, and so Slowdive was a band that I think are just as good, and they have I think a more impressive discography,
and just a completely different sound. They might be in the same genre, but they're just comparing them still is very difficult because they're just so different.
They are actually quite different. But still considered to be the same genre, I guess.
Something that they both have in common, and I think Slowdive even does like better, is they actually use guitar effects on all of their instruments, on the voices a lot of the time, on the drums.
You can really tell,
you can hear in the drums. They have like delay effects and stuff.
And that's always really good.
That's always really good. It's such a cool idea to just use guitar effects on anything. I've done that in my music, and it's just something that really sets the band apart from a lot of other bands because you'll just be listening and then you'll be like, what are they doing to the drums? Oh, that's like a reverb delay effect or something like that, or that's chorus on the drums. What's going on? Like, it's so cool to, especially when you know guitar effects, it's really cool to kind of pinpoint, whoa, the vocals have this effect on them, or, oh, the drums have this, or, oh, the bass has this. It's really cool to pinpoint that.
Yeah, that is something they do quite prominently, that's for sure. We don't want to make this whole video a discussion between comparing My Bloody Valentine and Slowdive, but like it's kind of an elephant in the room, so to speak.
Yes.
When talking about Slowdive, because they were literally penned by critics in the '90s when they came out with even their, in I think our opinion, like their greatest albums around that time in the mid '90s when they stopped making music, basically, because around that time they were just compared to My Bloody Valentine, especially the album Loveless, incessantly. Where artists or critics would be like, it's good, but I mean, when you compare it to like the king of the genre, it's really kind of lame and lackluster. And it's like, why are you? Don't just compare an artist based off of another prominent artist in the genre. Like take it as its own work, and they are different enough that you could separate them. So that was a little frustrating when I read about that, and I was like, oh. So that's why they were kind of an underground band for so long, and then it took them until 2015 or so. Until they
But at least nowadays, they're actually coming back in such a powerful way, and tons of new listeners, tons of youth, such as even ourselves. Although I think we got into them quite a bit before.
I was listening for a few years before.
Yeah, before the new surge. But still, with this new surge, there are tons of youth, tons of new listeners that are really getting into them, and getting into their old albums too. But with their self-titled album released recently, I think that's a very powerful thing for the band to do after a long time of having a hiatus, kind of like us with this channel.
Yeah.
They come back strong.
Hopefully
and
we'll have the same
solid
reaction.
album. Yeah, but we will talk later about our ideas, or at least my ideas, about the idea that their newest album is maybe not as good as some of their older albums, and does lack in certain areas. It's like they lost a little bit of themselves, or lost a little bit of their desire
10 years
to do
happened.
anything.
20 years happened,
20 years,
sorry.
yeah.
And so it's natural that their sound would evolve. Also, I'm pretty sure they were involved in solo projects, at least the two, frontman, frontwoman of the band. I'm pretty sure they were involved in solo projects for those many years. We haven't listened to any of it, but it probably would be good to check out.
It would be.
And already I know their third album, Pygmalion, we're going to have a disagreement on the pronunciation of this album.
Pygmalion.
Pygmalion. But the third album was already essentially a solo album by Neil, the frontman of the band. So I guess it makes sense that he would go into that direction. And so I don't know the history completely, but I doubt that the band broke up or anything like that because of the criticism they were receiving. I know their label did drop them after Pygmalion.
Yeah.
But
it is a little more experimental.
But it does seem like before that even happened that they were going in a direction where they wanted to pursue, more ambient folk almost kind of direction. So anyway, the preamble's done, I think. Good enough. We've talked about that enough. Let's go into the albums by album at this point. So you can start us off with Just for a Day.
Well, Just for a Day is a very interesting album for them to start with. It's a very bright album. If you know anything about photo editing, I would describe it in the terms of photo editing. For one thing, I would say that the saturation, which is like how vivid the colors are and how much color takes up the space of the picture, I would say that's been boosted to full. I haven't heard much music other than I haven't heard much music outside of the genre of Slowdive that does this. And then I would say that contrast is decreased. You can't really hear individual instruments super well, but you can overall hear just the sound, and it's very full and very expansive. And a lot of it is it's very bright. And there's actually a song called Brighter. And in the song Waves, they actually sing the lyric Brighter a lot. So brightness is a theme in the album. And I feel like just the whole sound is very vibrant and boisterous almost.
If we're talking about album themes, we have to mention for Just for a Day that waves and wind are a big theme, right? Both of those kind of together.
Yeah, no, it's like sailing on the sea. The first song is called Spanish Air, and it's massively I just feel like I'm on some pirate ship or just sailing through some distant ocean. I feel like that's such a cool feel to have to start the album with, and it kind of just pulls you into it with that first pretty energetic song. And I feel like throughout this whole album, it's very consistent. It's very I never feel like I grow bored. And if I do, it's the song's done, because none of the songs are really that long.
And that's the thing with all their albums in general, they're all pretty succinct. They're all 40, 45-minute albums, so discounting bonus tracks, of course. So, and 9, 10 tracks usually, right? So they kind of keep them pretty concise. And I've found for each of their albums that they are all pretty consistent. There's no real dull tracks I've found. And they have a sound for each one that they stick to, and they keep that consistent the whole time.
And something surprising about all of their albums, not surprising, something I really appreciate with all their albums is how, with the exception of maybe their self-titled or newest one, I would say that all their albums end really strong.
Yes.
All their albums end in such a way that I feel like their album is complete. So I don't really want anything more out of that. It's just this is done and I'm happy.
Exactly. On that note, as we're talking about Just for a Day, we should go by a little bit track by track. I have some notes on each track. We want to go through it, but we should mention that the final track, Primal, is just maybe their best closing.
It's I might not say best. Souvlaki Dagger has a special place in my heart, and also if you're going to include the bonus tracks, Country Rain also has a special place in my heart. Yeah. Both those tracks are I would say a little better than Primal, but Primal is just not only is it accessible, but it also stays. I've listened to that album a lot, and it's still just as good as the first time I listened to it, and it's just the ambience. They decided to go all out with that pedal effects on the voice, and it just makes it so epic and so like.
It's also, I think, their most energetic closer. Because,
Oh, yeah.
The other 3 albums, I will say, like, I do like Dagger, but I do think the closers on the subsequent 2 albums are not my favorites, really.
I can see that.
But consistent across every album since Just for Days, they've had a very mellow song to close out the album, right?
Yeah.
Almost increasingly so. And in Just for a Day, like, I think it ends on one of the most energetic and full-sounding tracks in the album.
Oh yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
So, yeah. Going through a little bit of Just for a Day, I guess we could just talk about notable tracks on the album. You already mentioned the first song having almost like a sea-like feel to it.
I would say, in terms of notable tracks, Catch the Breeze is like, I would say I love that. I fell in love with that track when I was falling in love with the album.
Yeah.
I feel like Catch the Breeze, though I've definitely gotten over it a little more. I've lost interest a little bit. That was the accessible track for me. And I would say Primal is the one that's really stood out and was also accessible. And it's weird because this usually doesn't happen. But in this album, the accessible tracks are the one that stay with me. And maybe that's just because I haven't listened to it enough. I've listened to it like 20 times, which you'd think would be enough. But maybe these songs actually just have really good re-listen value.
Yeah.
And they're accessible.
Yeah.
That's something that you don't find a lot, and I think that's very valuable.
Yeah, sometimes the more immediate songs can be the ones that are just immediate because they're actually just genuinely really good, and not just because they have some catchy hook.
Like in, actually, like, just a kind of sideline, like in Sigaros, in A Gettys Virion, Svefn G. Angler got me into that album, and I still love that song. I've not gotten over that song. So I guess it's kind of like that. It's a rare thing, but sometimes you can find it.
Yeah, like, exactly. Back to the album, I do agree with you on Catch the Breeze, the third track. Just that song has the energy of almost like billowing winds for me the whole time.
Yeah.
Where you're just kind of like being like drowned out in like, you know, a flurry of winds kind of thing all around you. And that's a really cool aesthetic they managed to get just by like, I guess, all the echoing and the delays and like the percussion just sounding so huge.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah.
It's brilliant. Yeah, also on that album, I do like the song Brighter a lot, which you mentioned a little while ago, but definitely a highlight for me as well, and a closer, as you said. So, yeah. I want to mention also with this album that there is the track 5, Eric's song, which is kind of like a short instrumental, and that's actually something they do on most of their albums. They're not always instrumental, but they do usually have like a break track in the middle.
And I really like Eric's song. It's a very, very nice track.
It is.
I would say that some of their instrumentals in later albums, such as Pygmalion, is a little bit better.
Yeah, they refined that sound.
But yeah, they really refined it. But yeah, that was one thing I would say. If there's going to be any criticism, I wouldn't even call it a criticism. I would just say it's a description. But of this album, I would say that it's really unrefined. It's very raw. It's very,
which is pretty typical of a debut album.
Oh yeah, of course.
But like, that being said, it's a pretty impressive first album.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And it honestly pretty much stands up to the rest of them. Like, I don't see it as really a step down below the rest of their stuff.
What would you give it in terms of tiers?
Probably a tier 2.
I could see a tier 2, yeah. I would say the same.
Yeah. So
tier 2, tier 3, something like that.
So anything else you want to say, closing remarks on Just for a Day?
I would say get into this album second, or maybe third. I would say if you're exploring the band, get into this album, but start with
like
either
4 albums. So I guess you mean just don't get into
it first.
Yeah.
Start with either Souvlaki or Slowdive, their self-titled album.
I totally agree.
And after those, then get into this album. Then get into Pygmalion. If you're going to get into that, if you're into experimental or very bleak,
or you just want to hear everything that they've produced.
Yeah.
Which is a fair reason too.
But yeah, don't get into this album first, just because it's their first album.
Yeah. Anyway, I guess moving on to their sophomore album, Souvlaki, which is, I think, their most popular album by miles.
That's the one that we got into first.
Yeah, it's the one that I heard of first in general, right?
Actually, Souvlaki might not be quite as popular, or it still is popular, but in comparison to their newest album,
I think it still holds that spot.
But if you look at Spotify and its song lists and all that, Sugar for the Pill from their self-titled album.
Okay, that's true.
And some other songs from their self-titled albums are really up there. They're really up there. Yeah, Star Roving. They're really popular now. And so I would say with the new wave, that's kind of funny, similar genre, with the new wave of listeners coming in, I would say that their newest album might be their most popular.
True. But I mean, I would implore fans that if you only have listened to the self-titled, you should check out Souvlaki. And in general, if you're new to the band, I think you should check out Souvlaki first. It's just like, it's a phenomenal album, and also I think encapsulates their sound the best out of all 4. So
for sure. And it's just
yeah.
Souvlaki has the perfect balance between being diverse, unlike Just for a Day, which is less diverse, more consistent, more kind of very the same throughout. No. With Souvlaki, it's very like diverse. It's like they have this sound, they have this idea, and they have so many just cool ideas that build to the whole, almost like a mosaic of similar colors, but somehow in a way using yellows and oranges and blacks and blues to contrast each other but build a whole.
I would say no track feels out of place, despite how there's a lot more variety in the music than Just for a Day. Yeah, like
Souvlaki has this really cool power to almost have a really good flow in the way that some songs are really upbeat and then they kind of go down a little bit and let you rest, and then they go upbeat again, and then they go a different type of upbeat that kind of keeps you still interested in that energy, and then they bring you down a little bit, and then they go up, and then they end it with Dagger, which is like the perfect down ending after some upbeat songs. I feel like that's such a powerful thing.
Something also I have to note about Souvlaki is just like almost every track fades out. I don't know if you noticed that.
I did.
But like
I did.
almost like I think about 8 out of the 10 main tracks fade out. It's just like very common for them to do that. They kind of pick a refrain or like a repetitive bridge or so, and just have some kind of lyric that continues being repeated as it fades out as things continue to swell. This track itself is fading on to the next.
Now, that makes you question, did they not know how to end their songs because it was such a continuous cyclical thing?
I guess sometimes people say, oh, it's a lazy way to end a song, but like, no, I think in Souvlaki, every time they end a song with a fade out,
it makes you want to continue.
It just has like a certain beauty to it.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. It's like a sunset almost.
Or a fleeting dream.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, very good description. So favorite tracks? No, first accessible tracks.
Like the ones people would probably want to listen to first to draw them in. I mean, the song that got me into the whole band was When the Sun Hits. So that's like track 7 on this album.
I think Allison
also,
because
it's the first track
and it's accessible. So what it can do is, if you're going to listen to the album, put on some way that you can listen to it as a whole, because obviously that's the best way to listen to any music, and put on Allison. It is accessible. It'll pull you right in with its energy, with its sound. It's such a unique sound. And then from there, you can just continue listening, and you'll be engaged. Starting at a later song, I think is ill-advised, especially for a band like Slowdive, which has really good albums as a whole. And so listening like to When the Sun Hits, which is most way through the album, or like at least halfway through the album, that could make it so that you're discouraged to listen to the whole album. But all of their songs are super equal in terms of how good they are.
On this one?
And yeah, exactly. And so I would say listen to Allison, and then you'll kind of go through. But yeah, most accessible songs, I would say Allison, When the Sun Hits. And funny enough, you showed me Souvlaki Space Station, and so I thought that would be the most accessible song, because when I was listening to it for the first time, I recognized that song because you showed me that before.
If you're into that kind of music,
I was like really
be hooked by it.
And the weird thing is, when I was listening to it, it was a completely different experience. I remember listening to it and being like, this is weird. And then when I listened to it in the context of the album, it was like a completely different song.
Oh, yeah.
So that's why I say with Slowdive, listen to the full albums. It's a completely different experience.
I guess we should mention that, like, in terms of the album being experimental or not, it's generally not a very experimental album, but Souvlaki Space Station is a bit of a weirder track for them.
They do use a lot of like effects on the voice. They use a lot of guitar effects on the voice, like ambience and that kind of thing. And that could be seen as
song
weird.
has almost like indecipherable vocals because of the fact that they're floating above the track so much. That's a very... If most of the tracks are like semi-lucid, that one's like not at all lucid. It's the most dreamlike one.
Yeah.
It's more, I guess, the most similar to like something by My Bloody Valentine.
How would you describe this album as a whole in terms of tone?
It's mellow and very like rainy and almost like wet.
And somewhat dark, like
somewhat dark.
Forecast. Like,
Yeah.
Forecast is what you find. No. Downcast.
Downcast. Yeah. A lot of the album, the best description I could give it is like waking up next to your significant other, like in the morning.
I can see that, yeah. Very interesting. Favorite tracks.
Favorite tracks for me are actually I was about to say this similar ones that you said for the accessible ones, but last listen I kind of changed my mind a little bit. I realized I really like the song Machine Gun.
Same.
Just because of the contrast between the verses and the choruses, where the verses are very lighthearted, positive, happy, and then the choruses kind of like cut in with those like, more jagged sounding guitar strumming and the minor chords, and then the different vocalist. and just like the contrast between the two is just it's so beautiful.
It's really, really cool.
So that song for sure. Allison I do really like, and then I do like Sing for the ambience of it and for those like haunting and almost eerie chords that come in near the end, like the high pitched chords that just take the song to another level. Like whenever it gets to that point, I always remember how amazing that song is.
Yeah.
And then Tsubaki Space Station is a good one. It's a little, I kind of have lost favor with it a little bit from hearing it a lot, but I do still love it in the context of the album. And then when the Sun Hits is a beautiful one to just like pull you in. It has the wall of sound guitar that you just would expect from.
And you actually find that wall of
shoegaze.
sound guitar a lot in their newest album.
Yes. Oh, they employ that really well in many of those tracks, which we'll get to later. But then the last highlight that I mentioned is Altogether, just because. Just listen to the first 5 seconds of how that song starts, and it's just like the most beautiful, like mellow and just reverb-soaked atmosphere, and it just pulls you in. And the whole song maintains that, and I love it.
I would say Machine Gun is one of my favorites. Maybe not by the band, but in the album for sure. Machine Gun has this really cool energy to it, and it's almost like a, like we said, downcast energy. It's almost like you're looking at the sky and there's like lightning, or that kind of energy where it's like almost not fearful, but just there's that energy in the air, and it's not necessarily like a happy energy, and I love that kind of sound. But way more than that, I would say, like I've said before, Dagger is definitely my favorite song. One of my favorite songs by the band, total. Like it sits in a special place in my heart. It has this like really melancholy just sound to it, and the high piano.
It's just kind of repeating in the background.
Yeah, it's
softly.
so sad, and like I find that I don't really listen to a lot of sad music. I guess probably more than most people, but that's just because I listen to a lot of music. But in all of the music that I listen to, rarely can I find a song that's that sad. Like I was talking about earlier with Saturation, this song is like really low saturation.
So yeah, we'll move on to the next album, which is Pygmalion. We pronounce it.
I like
different ways.
Pygmalion.
Pygmalion. Because I guess it has lion in it.
Lion and Pygma.
We'll call it Pygmalion.
So, for Pygmalion, this is the album with the white album cover, if you've seen it.
It's actually a very abstract album
It's
cover.
such an
I was
album-
noting on
yeah,
that today. I'm like,
it's-
most of their album covers have the band on it, right? Or,
Or some
an
person.
image. Like the first one I think is like a girl with a dress you can vaguely see.
Yeah.
And then the second is the band, and then the fourth is like this image of a head or whatever, right? In a box, which I'm not sure what the meaning of that is, but it's still not as abstract as Pygmalion's like strange, just blocks.
Yeah, it's really weird. And honestly, it fits the album very well. Because while the album is very like ambient still, it's very spacious. It's very empty.
We didn't mention for the last album what tier.
Oh, yes, you're right.
So that's a tier 1 for me.
I would say definitely tier 1.
Yeah. And moving on to this album is a good segue. You have mentioned how Pygmalion's your favorite Slowdive album.
Yeah, it's definitely
Just
a tier,
probably not-
it's definitely a tier 1, I would say.
Yeah.
Which is weird. I'm sure that's an obscure opinion. It might not be.
Definitely probably a more controversial choice. For me, it's a tier 2 album, but I still really do love it.
I think Pygmalion just has this unique sound, and it has this perfect balance of like experimentation. They really like did some cool things with the sound, but it also is really consistent and has a lot of cool exploration, a lot of cool ideas. It feels like almost like you're traveling around some natural place. And I've listened to the song a lot while doing art, and so it really fits for just creative inspiration, that sort of thing. Just because it's sparse,
It's the most
bleak.
spacious sounding album.
Yes,
made.
and it's
almost
it's
like
simple a lot
stripped
of the
down
time.
to just guitar and ambience and vocals.
And it's simple a lot of the time, and sometimes it's really good when you're listening, when you're just working on things or doing things like art. It can just really be nice to fall in the background, but then if you want to tune into it, it's almost meditative. It's almost something that you can be pulled into and just like lose yourself.
But I'd also say at the same time, this is not only their most experimental album, but also probably the darkest album. Like a lot of the songs have like a very eerie sense to them.
I would say the opposite, actually. I would say, well, maybe not their brightest album, but like, because Just for a Day is definitely the brightest album.
Yes.
But this album, I would say it's actually kind of just very gray in terms of bright and dark. Because darks, I would say, are acquainted a lot with dissonance.
There is
acquainted
a
a lot
on
with
this album.
like
Like,
bass.
at least the first half of it is quite dissonant.
Not dissonant. I wouldn't say dissonant. I would say experimental in some ways of having weird layers and weird harmonies and that kind of thing. But none of it is like dissonant. None of it makes me go uptight. It's all very relaxed.
That's true. The whole time this album goes on, like despite the fact that it has some experimental flourishes, interesting sound palettes, it is pleasant.
very pleasant and very relaxing. Very
Even at its weirdest.
oh yeah, for sure. And in terms of weirdest songs, I would say the weirdest songs are mostly found in the first half.
First
of the album,
half,
after Rudy.
Tracks 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
Those ones are kind of bizarre, but in a good way. Like they do some really interesting things.
Like looping of like voices, and it's quite experimental in how they create it.
I do want to mention Rudy though before we go.
Oh yes,
like,
Rudy.
It's amazing. My favorite album opener from the band. Like it's like 10 minutes, which you think is very long, but they justify it like so well.
No, yeah, it actually doesn't feel like 10 minutes because
doesn't.
it builds so well, and the tempo is slow, and it's just such a cool sound how they start with just guitar.
Just the guitar strumming, which kind of echoes about.
And then they have the voice come in and sing along with it.
A really nice melody too.
Really nice. And then they go on, and then the percussion comes in, the shakers. Yeah. And then slowly the actual percussion comes in.
The most subtle percussion, though.
It's all so subtle. And then it just builds. And then there's the coolest bass line that, like, just doesn't really
Which comes in
work
around the
with the song.
7-minute mark or so, too.
And it doesn't really work with the song in the same way that most bass lines would, which are just playing the lowest note or playing the root note. No. This bass line is, like, actually a sick
takes in, like,
thing.
a melody almost.
And almost, really. And that's such a cool sound. And then it just gets you in this, like, headspace of just, like, what is going on? This is so cool. And it doesn't, and just time disappears, and you don't need to worry about.
By the end of the song, I'm like, oh, really? That's it? Kind of thing? Like, oh.
And it's a 10-minute song. It's like, I think the only band that can do that, and do that a lot, is like Sigur Rós.
I guess also Godspeed too is like that, where they kind of have sort of really long tracks, lengthy tracks that, you know, keep your interest the whole time. The difference is that they have many different movements and ideas.
It's almost like different songs within the track, but I would say, this song, Rudy, it has this cool, like, idea that it's timeless, so you can just move on, and then you're just like, that happened? That was it. I just love that idea, and that happens for the whole album. It's almost like a microcosm of the album.
Pretty much with this album, like, you could have it in the background, or you could, like, be consciously listening to it, and you have two completely different experiences.
Oh, yeah,
I think me getting into it originally, I did more have it in the background, and so I did miss a lot of the subtlety.
And unlike, there's a lot of pop music. There's a lot of pop music, rock music, that kind of thing, and the purpose of it is to draw in your attention. The purpose of it is to almost like, it expects for you to have a very short attention span, and so it's trying to draw you in the whole time. It's trying to have like bass drops and all that sort of thing to make it so that they're always having your attention.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of a verse-chorus structure.
Yeah, this album never has that. That's maybe a flaw of it, but I would say it's a great thing in it.
It makes it so it's going to be inherently less, approachable
for sure
for casuals,
and that's why
including
I would say
myself for a long time.
That's why I would say there's no accessible song in this album.
No,
except for maybe the last song, just because that's the most memorable because you listened to it last. I would say, if anything, but like that's not innately.
It's
the
not
song.
a reason.
If that song were at the beginning of the album, it would not be the accessible song. So, yeah.
It's more like a treat for someone that has listened to the whole album in its entirety.
Really, yeah.
But yeah, no, definitely. There's no song that really can grab you, other than just you have to start from the beginning and let it just soak in.
So yeah, after the three experimental songs after Rudy, then there is,
which we should talk about a little bit because they're all really interesting.
Sure,
to be honest. Like, my phone died. Oh, that's okay. I don't need the notes. Like, for example, the second, third, and fourth tracks are definitely the weirdest tracks I think they've put out.
For sure.
Like, a lot of them have, like, interesting vocal samples that kind of continue on, maybe loop in the background, cascade around, and
they're all very hypnotic. They're all very, like, just put you in a weird headspace, and then you get out of it, and you're just, like, with the next song, and you're just like, that was interesting. And sometimes, if you're not in the mood for it, it can become repetitive. It can give you a headache. If you're not, like, in that mood. But then again, if we're going to compare it to My Bloody Valentine again, they do that a lot with their music, where they just have some like very repetitive, monotonous idea that they have for the whole song. It's very experimental, and in a way, I would say that these three songs touch into more of that territory.
Yeah, they do.
They normally do with a band.
But unlike My Bloody Valentine, where things are still overloaded and there's like a huge wall of sound going on, this is actually pretty stripped down.
Oh yeah,
sparse
for sure.
And just focuses on the vocals, guitar, and ambience, of which there's a lot of ambience, and usually they use pretty unique samples.
And sometimes percussion, but it's all very sparse, very, very quiet. Not the main thing.
Yeah. In track 3, I believe it was, you mentioned that there's this weird, when you listen to it, there's this weird sample that you really enjoy.
Where it sounds like there's like droplets of water falling down metal. I just love this idea
Miranda,
because...
I guess, is that track.
Yes, I love this idea because it's just... It sounds so cool, and you always forget it. Just like the album, just like this whole album, you always forget about that sound that one sample or whatever it is, you always forget about it. And then when you listen to it and you hear that, you're just like, oh, I remember loving this. This is so cool. And I love that feeling. I listen to a lot of music, and I don't get that feeling very often where you just hear this layer and you're like, I love that. And
the subtle detail they added in that like
I know
adds so much to the song.
Yeah, and it's so subtle that you would most likely miss it if you weren't really paying attention. And that's the almost like the staple of this album, is that it's very subtle and you have to really listen to it. You have to really like engage with it and put some effort in to actually enjoy it. But it's really,
and you get a
really
lot
rewarding.
out of it.
It's really
they
rewarding.
put so many cool ideas in it that are so hidden, right? Yeah. So after those tracks, and I do want to mention track 4, Trelazes, or I don't know how to pronounce it. Yeah, but that track is just incredible. I think that's one of my highlights in the album, and my favorite of the experimental ones. They just do this really cool thing with like the kind of arpeggiated strumming of the. I don't know if it's actually an acoustic guitar, but it sounds acoustic. It might be electric, but regardless, it has that kind of more raw sound to it, and it's very upfront, despite the rest of the track being very heavily layered and not lucid in the slightest. But that's a really, fantastic track. Hard to describe other than that, really. But then it gets into a bit of an interlude with cello, where there's a cello being played.
It's almost forlorn. There are some other layers, but it's mostly just like cello ambience, that sort of thing, for a minute and a half, and then it moves on. And that's almost like a point in the album where it's saying this is the half point.
Yes.
The rest of the songs are going to be very different. Not experimental, or not quite as experimental, but have a completely different sound.
Still stripped down.
It's more like
ambient,
Rudy. It's almost like going back to Rudy with its sound.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And Jay's Heaven is just a really, really cool idea. Where they have like, it's just, there's so many cool guitar things in that song. I would just say you have to listen to it. You can't.
Jay's Heaven has in my opinion, the coolest thing about it is how each channel has its own shimmering guitar layer, and they both kind of like, mingle together. They remain separate in the sound palette, but they almost harmonize with each other the whole time.
For sure.
One of the best effects, and that song, for its whole runtime, which is pretty reasonably long, 6 minutes or so, it's just really interesting.
And just like Rudy, it kind of just passes by. And if you're going to focus on any part of this album, you should focus on this song. Like, obviously you should listen to the whole album, but this song is a little more accessible. It's a little more in your face. And so focusing on this song can be a really nice entrance into this album. It's obviously after the halfway mark, so you'd have to get that far.
Hard to pick any song out of context though. This album, album flow, because it's just like, I don't know, very holistic experience, I guess.
For sure.
And the songs are all long. It's hard to pick them out if they're very long, I guess.
Yeah.
As well. But definitely lowers the accessibility of a lot of it too.
For sure.
You have to kind of commit to it.
Yeah. What's the next song?
The next song, I believe it kind of goes back to almost an interlude, but not quite. It's more just like a shorter track, which is Visions of LA.
Okay, Visions of LA. I love this song.
Me too.
It's so simple.
All it is like guitar and vocals.
And maybe at the end of this video, we'll have a cover of it. But Visions of LA, it's such a cool song. It's like, it's short.
It's the melody that really makes
so,
it though. It's the vocal melody, I think.
It's so like abstract. It's so I just love the song. I can't even describe it with words. It's just such a cool track, and it almost sounds like I'm in some fantasy world.
Yes.
Where like
it sounds almost medieval.
The singing
you could play. I imagine this song could be played in a tavern with a lute.
And the singing has tons of ambience. The guitar does sound like a lute or some sort of
just the way it's picked. It's kind of picked. It's really nice.
So cool. Such a cool sound.
And it just kind of passes by in a minute and a half, and I've won one more of it, but
No, it actually. I feel like it's actually. Unlike
one of their greatest
Is it
ideas.
actually a minute and a half?
Yeah.
I always feel like it's a full song. I actually feel, just like how Rudy feels like, oh, that was too short. I feel like that song's way longer.
What they do well with it is that they have an idea and they don't overstay it.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of space for it to breathe. Where they actually have a lot of rests and pauses in this song.
Very many.
But yeah. And then right after that, it kicks into the two other really great songs on the album, which close it off, which are
The
Blue Sky and whatever.
Blue Sky and Clear.
Blue Sky and Clear, yeah. Which is kind of an odd title, but like song is brilliant.
Yeah.
One of the most like beat-driven songs on the album, actually. Yeah. It has like some pretty strong percussion.
And I remember the main lyric has love as a word in it. So if you like that, there you go. But this song, it's such a cool song. It's another long one, and it's just...
But so justified.
The melody is divine, and just overall the sounds... the soundstage that they set up in this song is it's actually full rather than, unlike most of the album, it's actually something that's more full.
It took me off guard when I first actually paid attention to it, listened to the album. Like, oh, this song's more like their previous album.
For sure. Bit. More like Slowdive kind of style. And it's such a cool track just because while it's long, you actually just get really into it and you don't want it to end. And you're just, the whole time, you're almost like begging it, like, please don't end, this is so good. And then finally it ends and you're just like...
But it gets followed up with a very nice track as well.
This track is more like Visions of LA, but longer for one thing, and just so cool. It just has this really cool, like, once again, almost medieval sound to it, but it's very stripped back, very sparse. And then it's pretty much just singing, strings, and guitar.
I don't remember the last track's name. All of Us. All of Us, yeah.
All of Us, and the lyrics are very...
It reminds me the most of Cigaros out of anything they've
for
made,
sure,
because of the
for
strings.
Sure. The lyrics are very Buddhist or very like spiritual and like saying that we are all the universe or we are all, and like they're just very abstract, the lyrics, and I love that.
And then the song ends with just the instrumental strings kind of repeating and fading out.
Almost. Much like Andvari from Cigaros.
Like, yeah, exactly.
It's such a cool closer. And once again, they closed with more of a mellow track, which is kind of funny because the whole album's somewhat mellow.
True. It's not a contrast here. It's really, actually normal, but...
But still, it's a very nice track to end. And like I said, that's probably the most accessible track just because it ends the album. And this song, while you might say that it's simple, I tried to learn it on guitar. I don't know what they're doing, so
yeah,
it's nice. It's a really nice listen, and overall, it just closes off the album. And I feel like I just want to listen to the album again.
Which you do.
Yeah, exactly. I have done that many times. I just finish with All of Us, and then I'm like, let's go, Rudy, and just start the album again. Like it's such a good ender that I feel like I can't not restart the album, and that I would say makes an album a very successful.
If you feel like you want to just put it on again and not do anything else. It's probably a good sign that you like the album, or that it's just a really good work of art.
Yeah.
So on that note, what are your highlights overall for songs?
That's very difficult for me. I would say last two songs probably, Rudy probably. Maybe Crazy for You is pretty good.
Track two.
Yeah. So maybe the first two tracks, the last two tracks.
Yeah.
Also Visions of LA. So all the songs, I could list all the songs. If I'm gonna pick one, I might say Clear Sky and Blue.
Yeah. Clear or Blue Sky and Clear.
Yeah.
Blue Sky and Clear, Visions of LA, Rudy, and Trellises. Those are my four.
That's cool.
And that's half the album basically.
Yeah.
So at least in runtime, it's half the album.
Yeah.
But really good, really good. Mm-hmm. I definitely should have gotten into it earlier. Kind of left it until the end.
Mm-hmm.
Nah, the final album.
Final album.
It's a really good album.
It really is.
Like, I definitely think it's maybe it's not your favorite, but it's almost tied to Souvlaki is my favorite.
Okay, I can see it.
It starts off with Slow Mo, which is honestly an interesting track to start off with. It's not one that really catches your attention that much. It has almost like a slow start too.
For sure. I feel like with this song, it kind of gets you into the feel of the album. And I feel like for this album, you can't really pull out individual tracks too much just because, just like Just for a Day, a lot of the album is just very consistent in its sound, except for the last track, but we'll get to that.
It's tracks 1 to 7 are super, not samey, but like they're similar, as in they had a good idea and they just like went into different directions with it.
Yeah.
7 times.
And that's what an album should be, really.
Bizarre and different, but...
Yeah. I feel like it's like such a cool sound. So Slow-Mo is very much like a good intro to the album.
It's so chill. It's so relaxed.
Yeah.
It has almost like a kind of shaker type percussion to it. It has the two vocalists singing almost like, call and response.
And sometimes I do.
Super nice.
I've started jogs with that, and I always end up walking.
Yeah.
It just slows me down. It's kind of an interesting idea.
Yeah. The song is almost like it is actually decently fast paced. The song. It's like it's not slow, but it almost has like almost a slow motion effect to it.
Yeah.
Which is really cool, and it's pretty long, but it doesn't feel too long.
Yeah.
And then kicks in with one of my favorite songs, and also like I think the lead single of the album, which is Star Roving. Ugh, something about the guitar that just begins the song with it just building the tension, and then when the actual band comes in and kicks in with like the major riff, is just beautiful and has this feeling of being in a rocket being sent to space.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, Star Roving is like this really cool experience, and if you want to get into the band and like kind of understand their sound, I would listen to Star Roving, especially if you're just wanting to get into that album, the self-titled album, and want to get that sound. Listen to Star Roving.
Yeah.
That's like the epitome of that album.
I would say so as well, because it employs the like more subtle things that they took over from the previous albums that are still here, but majorly the wall of sound.
Wall of
techniques
sound
that
is
they just
huge,
have,
yeah.
and the full band sound and like prominent bass
And the
lines,
drums are very like
intense
upbeat
guitar.
and have reverb. I love that.
Yeah. It's a really good song. And then it continues the momentum really well with the third track, which is it's kind of funny. I was listening to it again, and like it almost is both fast and slow because it starts out like really upbeat and fast and like up tempo, and it has like pretty fast vocal melodies too, right? But then later on in the song, it almost like feels like it slows down.
Yeah.
And then it kind of kicks back in gear with the percussion and like the really chimey guitars. It's really, really well done.
Yeah, very well done.
And then the album goes to Sugar for the Pill.
I would say this is the accessible track in the album.
It's the most pop song I think they've made.
For sure. And it's a very, very pleasant listen, I would say that. And there's a very accessible, like simple guitar part that they do to start the song and end the song. There's a good hook. It's just a very
clear lyrics.
And I would say the wall of sound is just very pure. It's just very clear and clean.
This is also a song you can introduce someone to the band.
Oh yeah, no, I have friends that I've introduced to the band with this song. It's like, it's such a rare, it's just, I don't know. When I listened to this album, I just fell in love with this song, and then from there, it almost like branched out, and I was like, oh yes, Star Roving,
it's a good way to
and
connect
some other
with
ones.
songs.
But yeah, it's a really nice song. Very, not maybe not simple, but very accessible. Really something you can really attach to.
But for me, it's probably one of my least favorite parts of the album. After many more listens, I feel like I like the more energetic parts a little more.
That's fair.
And it's a good song, although I always am waiting for the next song to start, which is Everyone Knows.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is like almost like a harken back to the Souvlaki sound that they had, where it's again the reverb layered guitars, almost like dreamy vocals.
Yeah.
I love
Take Me
that
to
one.
America. It's like almost like it's almost like a reverie of remembering something and just being in that blissful headspace
Yes.
and then you're pulled out of it for the next song, which is glorious.
Yes.
This next song, I would say, is most likely the best song on the album.
No Longer Making Time.
It is just rich. The singing is amazing and almost Animal Collective. Well, when I think of Animal Collective, it's almost like the song Wide Eyed from Animal Collective. That sound, just this like rich vocals, this deep-ish voice. It's really nice. It's a really nice listen, and it's just a powerful song that has this amazing energy to it. Is like somewhat actually intense, which is not something you get from the band very often.
No, it's when the full band comes in. There's actually like it's heavy.
It's heavy for sure.
And what I want to say the most, what I love about the song, probably number one, and why it's one of my favorites, is that the chorus is delayed. Where it's like the band is playing and it's fast and it's intense, and then the full band comes in.
Yeah.
And there's just a good effect where it's like kind of running, and then like almost like a wind sweeps behind you as you're running.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
I love that idea.
And then the momentum carries with the seventh track, Go Get It, which like, I mean,
It has a very simple melody line.
it's more simple and it's more stripped down at the beginning, but
And the
it also
chorus-
has the same
Yeah.
full wall of sound.
Yeah,
choruses.
for sure. And the chorus, it's something that you can really grab onto. I would say it's probably the second most accessible track. Maybe Star Roving holds that place too, but
I think Go Get It was my first favorite on the album.
yeah,
when first
I
got
could say
into it.
that. This song is like, it has this really cool sound to it, and whenever the chorus happens, it's just like the singing, and then there's that strum, and there's that like just, and then it kind of strips back for a little bit as he sings the next lyric, and then it's like they're just hitting you with waves. And I love that sound. It's something that I really like value in that song. And over again, whenever I listen to the band, I always want that kind of thing. I always want that wall of sound, that power, and I know that they can move forward in that. They can do that a lot, but they don't do it a lot.
Yeah.
And that song, they really move forward in that. They really embrace that sound of just...
They do. And then eighth track, I mean, Falling Ashes is just so different. Like they
Once
just really
again-
strip it down.
Once again, they end with more of a melancholy, slower song. And this one is piano-based. It's very, very quiet, mellow, and has just this really nice piano part that I learned on piano. It's really nice. It's very simple. And then they just have background ambience and like weird sounds and that kind of thing. And then they have lots of guitars and I think some bass line later
very
on.
repetitive vocals,
And
like
very
repeated
repetitive.
refrain.
Thinking about love. Yeah.
And it's a nice, pleasant song, but it's definitely like
A little too
sucks the momentum out of the album.
And I would say it's a little too long.
a little too long.
What I value-
it's the longest track on the album, and it doesn't quite justify it.
My problem, I think if it were half the length, it would be really good. My problem with this song, though, as I always think of an album as a whole. And when I listen to an album, I have a certain idea in mind when I want to listen to the album. Like I have like, oh, I want to listen to this sound. Like, for example, Star Roving. I want to listen to that sort of sound. Like I said, that's the epitome of the album.
Yes.
So when I go into listening to this album, I want that sort of sound. And then when I'm just hit with that last song, it's too deep for that album, which is very energetic.
Yeah.
And I feel like it just doesn't, it's out of place, but honestly...
But it is a good song on its own.
The best, oh yeah, for sure. The best place to put it was at the end of the album, but it still is, I would say, a little too out of place and a little too long. And it being out of place just can take away from that enjoyment in the album.
Yeah, a little bit. But anyway, though, on a positive note, what are your favorite tracks overall?
Okay, I would say...
3 because it's a 8-song album.
I'll just say 2.
Sure.
Star Roving and No Longer Making Time. Oh,
and I agree.
Yeah,
yeah like
there
those are the 2 best in my opinion.
And that's after listening to it a lot. That's not like an initial opinion. My initial
I listened
opinion...
to this album the most, if not tied or around with Souvlaki. So.
My initial opinion would have been the 7th song and Sugar for the Pill.
Yeah, so 4 and 7.
Yeah, but
that
like,
has changed.
That's changed.
For me as well. Like I used to think those 2 were standouts. And then, still good, but those 2 we mentioned, tracks 2 and 6, best ones.
I would say out of any of the albums by Slowdive, this could be one album that you could listen to, like, not as a whole.
Yeah.
You could listen to just songs.
You could. Anyway, that's about all the time we have for today.
Yeah.
But stay tuned for a bit of a song cover at the end of this.
Yes.
And yes, we'll back. We'll be talking about more music in the future.
Don't forget to comment below any artists or questions that you have about Slowdive or anything that you want us to do in future videos. We don't just need to do review videos or discussion videos or discography.
We're down to do song rankings as well, favorite songs. And I want to mention, likely soon coming out will be a discussion about Tom York's solo discography and Atoms for Peace.
Since Anima came out recently.
Yes, it's kind of in celebration of that. So that's about it. Thank you for watching if you're still following us.
Yeah. Thank you for watching and farewell.